At some point, no matter how much you love your watch, letting it go may be the best option. And this is really something I have come to understand after having worked in after sales for years. But what are those three main reasons I have encountered that would justify drawing the line? The first reason is what I call the troublemaker. And no, this is not tied to any specific brand or model. But how do you spot a troublemaker and when does a watch actually become one? Ideally, a watch only needs routine servicing every few years. But what happens when it keeps coming back with new problems? Well, I have seen it countless times. Watches that repeatedly return to the service center for one repair after another. Sometimes the watch comes back with the exact same issue that was supposedly fixed just months earlier. What's even more frustrating, I think, is that at times everything was done correctly and yet the problems keep returning. In many cases, the cause is more of a fundamental flaw in the movement or an issue that simply can be detected no matter how much you try. And at some point, even as a watchmaker, you reach a stage where you have to admit there is no clear solution. By the way, in German, we often call these watches Monday products, meaning they were probably made on a Monday morning when someone wasn't quite at their best. The phenomenon becomes especially noticeable with vintage watches. Yes, I know I mention vintage watches in almost every video, but I think it's really important that you understand why. A lot of vintage watches, they often require repeated interventions, sometimes unexpectedly, even shortly after service. And I explained why this happens and what to look out for in a previous video I did a few months ago, including how to avoid these situations. But I would say the rule of thumb is simple. If your watch spends more time in the service center than on your wrist, it may be time to ask yourself how long you want to keep investing in it. Well, all of this comes down to two things, frustration and most importantly, cost. And speaking of cost, there are certain situations where the price alone becomes the deciding factor, and there are several reasons why. In some cases, repair costs can be highly disproportionate compared to the watch value. And I think a lot of people are surprised about this fact, and I think it comes down to a lack of knowledge at the time of purchase. But let me explain what I really mean. Some buyers were not aware that, for instance, depending on the complications, the service costs are higher than for regular three-hand movement. This becomes a problem when, let's say, someone buys a watch for 1,400 and the service alone costs 400. And I think this is when questions start to arise. But the reality is this. Service costs are not based on the watch price, of course. What I mean is a 2000 watch and a 1000 watch with the same ETA 2892 movement require, of course, the same service effort. This means the service cost is automatically not in the same proportion relative to the price of the watch. And I think this comes also a bit down to the client not really understanding the service price list. Because some people are really not aware that, for instance, the full service only covers the movement overhaul, gasket replacement, cleaning, and restoring water resistance. And anything beyond that, like let's say new crystal, crown, or pusher, comes at an additional cost, making the service even more disproportionate for a lower price watch. Setting aside other factors, there are a few obvious examples that can make a service cost disproportionate. Water damage, for example, can require replacing the dial, the hands, and other major components. Or a serious impact, because let's say you dropped your watch, can be even worse, because repairs may cost almost as much as a new watch, especially if the movement has to be replaced. And As I explained earlier, with vintage watches or in general older watches, parts often need to be custom made, which can significantly increase the cost. Because depending on the brand, I mean, you have just a certain amount of years where the brand promises the availability of spare parts, and in some cases, you can actually read that on the brand's website. Now, going back to this issue, the thing is, once you invest in a watch like this, it can feel like a lost bet at the casino. I mean, you keep putting money in, hoping to recover your investment, but the reality is this: the money is already gone and will never come back. So, what justifies service when the cost is disproportionate to the watch's value? The answer, I think, in my opinion at least, is that the watch is replaceable, whether because it's a rare limited edition or, more importantly, carries an emotional value that money can't replace. The third reason to draw the line is actually quite logical. Yet you would be surprised how many people it wasn't obvious to. At some point, you have to look beyond the technical side and ask yourself, does this watch still mean enough to justify the cost? Especially when it's a watch you rarely wear and can barely remember why you even bought it in the first place. I know that as watch enthusiasts, we often feel obligated to service a watch. But on the other hand, some might ask, why even invest in a watch you no longer truly care about? But the truth is, you wouldn't believe how many watches have been sitting in our service center for months or even years. And the worst part is some owners eventually even forgot they left them there. But it gets worse than that, because after they picked up their watches, many of these watches end up forgotten, and again, until they stop running or need another service, and the cycle repeats. Well, the reason is actually quite simple. You have no real connection, as I said earlier, to the watch in general, but you keep hoping that one day you will wear it. It's a bit the same as keeping old clothes in the basement, telling yourself you will wear them again someday, either when I lose weight or I will for sure find a occasion again, even though you know it's never going to happen. I think the reason why we even get to this point is because the collection loses its purpose and becomes driven by the excitement of buying rather than meaningful choices. That's why my advice in this regard is very simple. If a watch holds no special memories and creates no emotional connection, I mean, letting it go usually won't really matter. And the good thing is actually that sometimes letting go creates space, both physically and financially, for maybe something that truly deserves your care and attention. So that's it for today. And if you happen to be in a decision making phase like this, I really hope this video has given you a good foundation for your decision. In the meantime, if you enjoyed today's video or found it helpful in any way, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. But for now, thank you for tuning in today. And as always, stay blessed and see you next time.